This is The Final Word. It's just the weekly show. The show that doesn't have another name. Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins coming to you from our home state of Victoria, not long before Christmas, not long before the Boxing Day test, but there is a bit to get through before then. Machinations around the Border Gavaskar Trophy, a bit of World Test Championship updates, wash up from England, New Zealand, the South Africa and England women's test that is just completed. We've got a Lions squad. We've got some Big Bash, more Jason Gillespie news. This has been the Jason Gillespie podcast for the last few weeks. Shakib Al-Hassan, the University of Western Australia. It's all happening. And the latest out of Bulawayo. This is what you get on The Final Word Weekly as we go around the cricketing world. Hello to you, Adam Collins. A couple of days out from our live show date in Melbourne, where we're going to be on stage with Ricky Ponting and Glenn Maxwell.
We will, and we'll be on stage in Sydney with Simon KATICH, I can now announce, on the 7th of January. We've just been working through some stuff with Kat, but he'll be doing the Sydney book launch for Maxi with us there. So the two live shows we have to go are both very Maxwell-centric, but also the chance to celebrate the careers of Ricky Ponting and Simon KATICH, who are two people who are very close to Glenn. So the whole thing ties together beautifully. Those who have read the book will know that already, and those who haven't,
it's probably my favourite story from the book when I was reading through it, doing the edits, was the Simon KATICH playing with Glenn Maxwell in county cricket. I won't give away the punchline because I'm sure it'll come up during the show, but their interaction while batting together in the middle was probably the standout moment.
Yeah, in a blast game in late in Kat's career, they were playing for Hampshire together at Essex, and it's a cracking story. So we'll leave that to then. I should also say this show's brought to you by Morris Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. We thank them for their support throughout this year. We're going to be doing the story of Morris Blackburn in totality on Storytime next week. So we've found an interesting creative way to make that Storytime centric, and we will do that. So you'll learn more about Morris Blackburn throughout the course of the Australian summer on this show. But yeah, live shows. There's still tickets for Maxi on Sunday night in Melbourne. We're going to be coming straight from the Junction Oval, where I'm captaining the Australian media that afternoon in a T20 that we're trying to squeeze into 2.5 hours in order to get to Melbourne when the doors open at Max Watts for us to prepare and set up the stage and do the things that we do before we go live, as it were, at 7:30 Melbourne time. So yeah, it's going to be significant. So be there, get a book, get a photo with Maxi, get your book signed, watch us go through our paces with 300 or so other rugged individualists. It'll be a nice thing.
Yeah, we've got a few new surprises. So if you've come to a Final Word live show before, it won't just be copy paste. There's always something new.
It won't be the same.
Yeah, get on stage in Melbourne.
Yeah, it'll be different to the Melbourne show we did before. So we've had a version of the show we've been doing around the country, and it'll be changed for Melbourne and Sydney, where we performed last year when we were at the back of that World Cup. So yeah, that'll be lots of fun. Geoff, as a intro topic, I thought you would be interested in knowing that we've received a press release this morning saying that the One Day Cup has been named in honour of Dean Jones. Now, this was my instinct at the start. Oh, they'll name it. It should be named after Dino. You did a bit, or Michael Bevan, or both, indeed. It'll be the Michael Bevan Medal for the best on ground for the Norm Smith, best on ground in the Granny, and Dean Jones Trophy for the actual cup itself for one-day cricket, which was voted on by 10,000 people who completed a survey. My impression was it was those two, and clearly the voting public agreed with it. You did some myth-busting on this and made the case quite compellingly that Brad Hodge should have been involved as well, but you can't fight with icons, and Jones and Bevan are two of those.
You can fight at Icon nightclub in Geelong, though, if you want to do that. That's a different proposition. I think the Michael Bevan medal, I like that. That works really well. He must have played in more finals than anybody. I think he played in 9 of them from memory and won 6, something like that. So that does make sense, and had a fantastic record in finals, made a lot of runs in finals. Dean Jones didn't play in a few finals and didn't have much success personally or team-wise. I think he won. I think Victoria won once, but he did in
94, 90. Yeah, I think he did in 94,
he might have made
95,
runs in one final.
Yeah, when they won it in the shorts, my favourite summer, that was Dino was leading from the front that year. But yeah, you're right. More generally, the finals, the Robert DiPierdomenico of the Mercantile Mutual was Michael Bevan, and the Brad Hodge record with the number of tons he made. They'll find another way to recognise Hodgie at some point.
Well, I just thought, given it's a domestic comp, Dino and Bevan are famous for what they did in national colours rather than the state colours, and they could have recognised that. It might have been the one-day player of the year medal being named after them, something like that. I thought would have been more appropriate, given Brad Hodge's record in domestic 50-over cricket is miles and miles ahead of everybody else in terms of number of runs and games and hundreds and all the rest of it, and did win titles as well. But there's the poignancy. Dean Jones was a relatively early death, and people miss him, and he comes up a lot with conversations from players of that era and people who were younger like us, of our kind of generation, who watched him growing up. So there is that emotional attachment, and I fully understand why people would want to be reminded of him on an annual basis when all eyes turn to 50-over domestic cricket.
Let's tear into it, Geoff. Got a lot on the agenda today, starting with the breaking news. We don't often get to do this, but not that we're breaking the news. Let's be really clear about this. But Tom Decent in the Sydney Morning Herald, our great mate Tommy, has broken the story that Nathan McSweeney will not be in the Test squad when it's named later today. By the time this episode's published at 5 p.m. Melbourne time, it's entirely possible you'll already know this news officially, but he had the scoop that it's McSweeney out after 3 Test matches, and in all likelihood, Sam Constas in for his Test debut on Boxing Day, which will make it an even bigger day, given they've already sold out that day of Test cricket. Having a 19-year-old straight out to bat on day one would be a pretty special thing to see if it does play out that way. So, yeah, I mean, there have been many 1 Test careers. There have been many 3 Test careers. I hope that McSweeney's isn't that. It's that abrupt shift from having felt like he'd made it after Adelaide, the 38, which felt like 88, and then being not out at the end, hitting a beautiful square drive just before Australia hit the winning runs at Adelaide just probably 12 or 13 days ago or something like that, to now being out of the team entirely. It should not mean his career's over. It should mean that he gets another chance in the fullness of time in a position that he might be better suited for. But with Bumrah smothering him the way that he has, we spoke about this briefly on our Ashwin episode yesterday. To an extent, this is... well, they won't be doing it for him, but to an extent, this could be something that does preserve his opportunities into the future. That's a positive spin, and it does mean they've protected the senior players, and there'll be criticism of that. There'll be views that a young player with 3 caps to his name's been sent packing at the time when Khawaja and Marnus's returns have been diminishing for ages, but they're trusting there on the body of work that Khawaja and Labuschagne have achieved at the top level, and McSweeney's yet to. And given there's so much to play for with 2 Test matches to go and the series being tied at 1-1, that's the bold decision they've made. And there's been criticism of the selection panel not making bold calls. Well, I think this meets that criteria.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings about all of this. We talked about that second innings at Brisbane and whether it mattered, the idea that it was unimportant. I think it mattered here because I think if McSweeney had been 45 not out, then they wouldn't have been able to make that call. It wouldn't have come across properly. I'm open to the idea that you have to make decisions for right now, and that is something that I think a line I've pushed in the past is that in Australia we treat emissions from the Test team far too seriously because we act like everybody who's left out, it's the end of their career and they're being sent upstate to live on a farm where they've got a lot of room to run around. But, you can take a more squad approach to it, as other teams do, and keep players coming in and out of the side. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But in this case, I feel like McSweeney's been hard done by, not necessarily so much for being left out when it is evident that the job is a very difficult one for him to do, but I think he's been hard done by and being asked to do that job in the first place when he probably wasn't best suited to do it. I know it's a gamble and it might have worked, but it just, even before Perth, I thought it seemed too clever by half coming up with this sort of non-solution for the opener spot, a bit like getting Steve Smith to do it for a while. There have been these sort of tricks at the Australian camp willing to try, but they're not actually willing to see them through long term. So Smith does the job for 4 tests and then moves back down the order. McSweeney does it for 3 and then is likely to be moved on. It'd be funny if the Australian camp were like, okay, now this report has come out, we'll pick him anyway and try to make out that the report was wrong to begin with. But assuming it does go as expected, it seems unfair on that basis that you've made this left field call, but you don't actually have the conviction to back it all the way through the series.
The problem they had from the outset here after Warner retired last year was that nobody banged the door down. There was nobody who was making the most compelling case, which is why they went for a fudge in Smith. And look, a fudge that I thought was a good idea. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't suggest it as far back as the 2023 Ashes. I did. I said that I thought one way that you could reinvent Smith in a position that requires you to absorb as many balls as possible. Oftentimes that is the case with an opener. That might have worked for Smith. He, after 4 test matches, went back to number 4 and look, that's a whole different conversation. But second time around, had Renshaw or Harris or Bancroft, had any of those 3, or indeed Constas after making twin tons in the first round, had he gone on with it, it would have been them opening, not McSweeney. It just turned out that McSweeney was on the heater at the perfect time. So I don't have a problem with anyone with the decisions they've made here. I think that it was the rational way of arriving at a conclusion when no one else was. You couldn't pick Bancroft the way he was going at the start of the summer. It wouldn't have been reasonable, wouldn't have been fair. Renshaw is the one who sits one out, one back in all of this, and has shown at test level he can do it, but he's picked the 3 worst possible times in his career to have bad runs in the start of 2017-18, the start of 18-19, I think it was, and of course the start of this season, when he's in all 3 instances not been able to do it under the heightened scrutiny of knowing there was a spot open at the top of the list. So that's the story. So just going back over the history, so it's easy to say that, well, it shouldn't have been McSweeney, but there was no one else right then. Had Cameron Green remained fit, let's remember, if Green remained fit, I reckon Travis Head's doing the job this summer. They were laying the foundation for it. It was very much a don't ask any questions about Travis Head opening energy around media commitments and so on. Like there was an effort to socialize this idea. It was definitely trailed in the media, and the reports were that he was going to open the batting for South Australia in the Sheffield Shield. So in some respects, they've avoided that, because who would have wanted Travis Head opening in this series when what he's doing at number 5 is crucial to the balance of the Australian team as we have it. And him coming in when he's come in over 36 last week and over 40 the week before has given him the best chance to be as good as he can be. So the one thing I absolutely agree with, though, is that what happened in the second innings at the Gabba has cost him big time. I think we all have said it and asked it of different people. Why weren't they thinking of, and it wouldn't have been 45 not out, by the way. They batted for 18 overs and it rained, right? So, well, they bowled for 2. So let's say it was 20. He would have been 16 not out or 18 not out based on the scoring rates from McSweeney so far in Test cricket. That probably would have been sufficient had he got through the new ball of Bumrah one more time. But because he was maybe in 2 minds about having to try and move the ball along, it prompts that really bad shot, a bad way to get out, an ugly dismissal that from a guy who'd been leaving the ball so well. That's the one thing he had been doing well, was leaving. And he finds himself on the outer. So it's a tough break. I don't think it should be the end. There'll be other opportunities in the top 6 sooner rather than later. We know that. And he's had some experience, and it's not going to get much harder than facing the best bowler in the world, one of the greatest fast bowlers ever, in a ridiculous vein of form. So the next time that he plays Test cricket, McSweeney, it'll be easier than this. I can almost guarantee it.
It's not necessarily going to be any easier for Sam Constas if he comes in as well. It's a different thing opening for New South Wales in the Shield and being an up-and-comer versus facing Bumrah at the MCG, where the pitch has been pretty conducive to fast bowling. So you may not see towering success from Constas compared to what McSweeney's done.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Who was the last cricketer to do on Boxing Day? Ed Cowan certainly did in 2011. Yeah. I'm not sure if we've had a Boxing Day Australian debut since Tom Curran did. Jackson Bird did in 2012, spot on. So in consecutive years there was Cowan and Bird, and then Tom Curran for England in 2017. Oh, Scotty Boland, how can we forget? Yeah, absolutely. So, when was the last time there was a top 6 player? It probably was Cowan. So that'll add to the mystique of Boxing Day when there could be up to 90,000 people there, and he's got that magic of the prodigy thing going on. There's going to be so many words written about this guy's backstory between now and then. I can't wait to devour all of them. And let's see whether he can get through. And if it is Constas and he can get through, that'll be a huge moment in Australian cricket, because they clearly see this guy in a similar way that they did Bukowski, right? Bukowski was being lined up as a guy who could do the job from early 20s and play for a really long time. Well, that's the opportunity that he may have in front of him.
I hope they play something by the prodigy when he comes out to bat. Magic people, voodoo people. Sam Constas coming out to the middle. The Border Gavaskar, broader implications on the World Test Championship. This is going to get interesting because South Africa play Pakistan on Boxing Day. Pakistan are leading in the ODIs, 2-0 up at the moment, which is interesting. Basically, if South Africa win one of their 2 tests against Pakistan, which they're playing in South Africa, then they will qualify for the World Test Championship final. For India, the draw in Brisbane is not a bad result for India at the moment. They've got India have 2 more tests. Australia have 4 because they go to Sri Lanka to play 2. So basically, if India win the last 2 in this series, they're through to the WTC final. Doesn't matter. Australia can't pass them in Sri Lanka. If they win one and draw one, then Australia would be knocked out in Sri Lanka at 1-1. So if they did what they did last time in Sri Lanka and won a test and lost a test, if they lose and draw against India in their next 2, or if the next 2 with India and Australia are split, if it's a win and a loss, then Australia would need to win at least one of the tests in Sri Lanka and possibly draw the other one. I'm not sure if they would lose the other one. In order to go.
That's quite important because there's not going to be any draws in Gauls. So, there've only been 2 draws this year.
Sometimes it rains for a week in Gauls straight.
That's a fair point. But, I mean, balance of probability is that draws are so infrequent that, let's almost take the draw out of this. What happens if Australia win both of these test matches? If they lose both of them in Sri Lanka, have you done that calculation?
Yeah, because they would tank India's because the 2 losses would tank India's percentage. Then India would be out of the running. Right. So India have to. India have to not lose one. Really, I mean, they could lose one and maybe still make it. But if it rains in Sydney, potentially, there's always a chance of a draw there. If it's a win and draw, India are in good stead.
Well, 1-1 from here, right, would be a Desmond Tutu in series terms. It would mean that if Sri Lanka then won the first Test match at Gaul, Australia would need to win the last Test match of the World Test Championship cycle to go through, which would be bloody exciting. That is assuming that South Africa win at least one of the 2, and I think that's fair to bank on at this point because, as we'll come to in a little bit. Well, I was going to say Pakistan's a rabble and therefore, but really that means nothing in terms of the performance of their men's team. But still, South Africa are on a roll and you'd expect them to continue to do that with so much to play for.
England, New Zealand. That was fun, by the way. If you weren't following along the dailies from there, Cameron Ponsonby and Jeremy Coney formed an unlikely duo. The future and not yet the past, but still the present. But a bridge across generations. It was like Christmas dinner with the older generations and the younger coming together and enjoying one another's company, as the cricketers like to say.
Yeah, I like the way they developed their own energy probably by the second Test match, I'd imagine, when they really got into groove. Although they did a good job in the first Test as well. The actual series itself, lots to take from it. Very, very baseball kind of series, wasn't it? From very high to very low, all in the space of a week or 2. Zach Crawley's under the pump again. Like it feels like we go in this cycle with him as well, where he can look a well beat up. Started 2024 really. Obviously 23, he was excellent, but did a lot right in India. But since that Indian series, he's struggled, and especially with what happened against Matt Henry, where he barely got out of the blocks in any of the innings that he played. And now we've got the Ben Stokes conversation again about whether he's suitable as a bowler. And I know he overbowled in that first innings on that first day, especially, which was partly a match situation thing.
But he always does. When he bowls, as captain, he bowls super long spells, and that's the way he prefers to do. He'd rather come on and bowl 9 overs than bowl 4 and 5.
And it's a flex too, isn't it? It's I'm Ben Stokes, I'm stronger than you thing, which is caught up with him, I reckon. Here, it's a personality trait. when he's told not to do something, he crashes through the wall, and sometimes that works for him as a leader, but it doesn't work for him as a bowler, or it hasn't worked for him here. Or maybe it doesn't work for him as a bowler now that he's had so many injuries that he's collected along the way, and the hamstring injury and the reoccurrence of it. So it won't affect him too much in the short term, because I don't expect he was going to the Champions Trophy anyway. England have got some space now between now and the summer against India. But, when thinking ahead to Australia and the configuration that they want, I'm sure that in all the Dream 11, Stokes would be the fourth seamer. If he's not the fourth seamer, then, that would be interesting as to who else might find themselves batting at 6. And genuine pace from Will O'Rourke, bowling up to 95 miles an hour in the old money, so above 150 against England, hitting blokes, hit Root, hit Bethel at one point. So for New Zealand, the fact that Southey finished up this week and it was a nice farewell and nice speeches, as you'd expect from a guy who was getting that farewell goodbye, the end named after him, couple of wickets on the final day. Could have had Root caught in the cordon at the end as well, but was put down by Tom Latham, which was a shame given how much those two have played together. And Latham's his captain, but he did end up getting Duckett and got Bethel late in the piece as well, caught at backward point. By that stage, New Zealand were well on their way to a massive victory, one of the biggest victories of 2024. But yeah, Will O'Rourke, we saw him bowl firsthand, Geoff, earlier this year, and it just feels like they're at the right time. New Zealand are getting a couple of faster bowlers coming through who can quite comfortably pick up from where Southey and Bolt have left off.
And O'Rourke looked good when we saw him, but looked better in this last couple of weeks here. So that's a development in a short space of time. Yeah, it was an interesting farewell. And so Bethel batting at 3 there and then rocking up in the Big Bash last night at the time of recording was already over, and playing 20-over cricket in Australia. The Southey thing got his way up to 98 test sixes, so he hit 5 more in across the last couple of tests, and then came out to bat when they were already about 700 ahead, and didn't manage to, he tried to tee off, wasn't the ball to try to hit for 6, sort of short outside the off stump, trying to hit it over long on, and skewed it up in the air and got caught. But so he ends up level with Chris Gale, isn't it, on 98, and he was so very close to 100, the 100 sixes that Adam Gilchrist hit. Brendan McCullum was 107. So he's top 5. He's equal 4th all time on the 6 hitting list, which is, an extraordinary thing for a guy who, let's be honest, in the last 7 or 8 years of his career couldn't really bat.
Yeah, it's a great quirk. And he did hit 3 in the first innings as well. I mean, he knew he was going everyone knew he was going for the 100 sixes. There was no faux modesty about any.
Why didn't he come in earlier? They're about 600 ahead, and they're like, no, Daryl Mitchell will go in next. No, Glenn Phillips will go in next. No. I'm like, just put him in.
Yeah. I guess at some point at some level you've got to treat the game with respect.
You're already 650 up on day 3.
Well, no, but I mean, they weren't 650 ahead when Daryl Mitchell walked in. I mean, my point is, you got to.
They were close enough. I mean, they were over 500 ahead.
You can't be elevating a guy to hit a statistical record. It'd be like having James Anderson play 3 more Test matches to be the second most Test wickets. Right? It's not a thing.
Sure.
So you can't. Yeah, it's a thing for you, but it's not a thing in real life. Coming second is something that you're 100 behind the guy that came first. But the Bethel thing is the biggest takeout point from England here. So he was picked for the squad on spec, played due to injury with Cox. Looked good. I didn't watch much of the series, but he hasn't been defined by blazing away and smacking the ball 100 metres. It's been by letting the ball go and playing conventionally. So what does that mean for Pope? Pope's kept in this series. Does that mean that I cannot see a world where Jamie Smith doesn't come back? So does that squeeze Pope out? Like, these are the types of questions that you could argue are good to have, but also they'll want to kind of land a blueprint, I think, given that Pope's the vice captain. He was captaining that England team as recently as the home summer in Stokes' absence. There's a bit to play out there. Or in Pakistan, my apologies, in Stokes' absence. So
what does it mean for, if Pope's getting squeezed out of that side, what does that mean when Stokes does his hamstring again before the Ashes next year? Pope's been leading that side. In his absence, what an anticlimax it would be after all of the Bazball reinvention stuff if Stokes does get injured again, which doesn't seem that unlikely at this stage.
Well, maybe he's not. Yeah, look, it's pure speculation, but if Stokes is only playing as a top 6 batter, that would change the frame on how England want to set up for Australia, because there'll be others who they can go to who would be able to offer them a fourth option with the ball. And you don't always need it in Australia, but you often do. And, you know, you can even look at the way they've picked this Lions squad, right? Inside the Lions squad, who are going to be playing a few games in Australia between the 14th of January and the 2nd of February. They've got a KATICH game at Brisbane. Two KATICH games at Brisbane, I should say. And then they've got an Australia
Will Basisto coming out of retirement, hopefully. He was just playing in the Nepal League, the Nepal T20 League recently.
Glad you saw that. I thought you'd quit Twitter forever, Geoff. I thought you and everyone else had quit Twitter forever. We were tagged into the Will Basisto tweets on Twitter this week saying that he's playing. What's it? Is it the Bangladesh?
No,
Lanka,
it's Nepal.
Nepal, sorry, yeah. But I love that his name's. They got the little plane next to his name on the team sheet. So, like, he's officially an overseas T20 circuiteer, Will Basisto. Yep. There will be a time for our guy, Geoff, the Caxi legend himself.
Persistence.
Get him back.
Persistence.
And they play their third game against, it's actually an Australia A game as opposed to a Caxi team. And that's at the Prism at Silverwater at the end of January and the start of February. But you look through the squad, right? Yeah, the headline is Rocky Flintoff's there as a 16, 17-year-old because Andrew Flintoff's coaching. Rocky's been called up to play in it. He also played some Lions games recently. He's clearly being fast-tracked. But you scratch beneath the surface. The real headline is Bashir's coming out. Tom Hartley's coming out. These are the guys who may end up being frontline spinners in Australia next summer. And spinners in Australia, not fun. We know that, unless your name's Nathan Lyon or Graham Swan for one summer back 14 years ago or something like that. Like, they've got to solve that problem too. And it'll be an even more acute problem if Stokes isn't bowling. So these things are kind of intertwined. Other names that jumped out at me from the A squad, from the England Lions squad, James Rue's been picked for that. He was the Somerset prodigy a couple of years ago. Two genuinely quick bowlers in Josh Tongue, who played an Ashes test last year before getting injured, and John Turner from Hampshire. He's played some white ball games for England. Sam Cook, train's going to come from Essex, who is more likely to play at home rather than in Australia, but still he's getting that opportunity to play for the seconds, as it were, and some others who are younger on their way up, like James Coles, who everybody likes. But yeah, just thought that Bashir thing was interesting, Geoff. Like, he's taken the third most wickets in the world in Test cricket this year, but going away with a development squad because they just want to see what it's like in Australia, a country where he's never bowled at this level before.
Well, I'm 100% a good idea to even just to give him the exposure to the conditions, to the light, the heat, the weather, the pitches in a context where there's not as much riding on it, right? Because he is their number one pick at the moment, so he is likely to be the guy that they bring out in a year's time, although who knows, they'll probably find some 17-year-old between now and then who's played a couple of Lancashire League games or something, and they'll chuck him in with an average of 78 and go, oh, we'll just like his action.
Yeah, Josh Hull. Josh Hull's tall, and we like the idea of tall spinners, and he wasn't very quick when he played for England. He was quicker on TV in the games when they're playing in the 100, and they probably juice up the speed guns. But, maybe a bit of left arm ortho from maybe Ollie Robinson will make a comeback as an off spinner. He's always struck me as the guy who could be an off spinner, Ollie Robinson, not the keeper.
We're gonna get Shoaib Bashir to wear some platform heels, so that he's now 8'1", and then because he's tall, he's got to be good. Tall bowlers must be good, right? Like we're evidence of that right here. So look, I like that they're not worrying about hierarchy or whether it's beneath him now to play a development game, because it's smart to get some game time into him in Australia.
Geoff, before we go to our first break, let's remind our listenership of the virtues of superannuation.
Look, let me just say this. If you're in Australia, if you're a person who lives in Australia and you work, then at some stage you are going to want to retire. That is a thing. That is the way that these things work. And when you retire, you're going to want to have some money, even though you're not working. I know it's a complicated sort of concept, but you will need somebody. You will need an organisation that can manage your retirement savings. You will need somebody who knows what they're doing. CBUS been around for decades. They know what they're doing, and the key thing is that they don't have any shareholders. This is a point. This is the best part of the whole superannuation thing for me. The super fund exists not to siphon off your money so that they can pay it to shareholders as profit. They exist so that they can put your money back into the fund. And that's why they want people to join up. So the reason that there is this campaign to say go and join them is that the more people who join them, the more flexibility and financial clout they've got to help all of their members. It's a rising tide lifts all boats situation. And you are not funding some executive's golden parachute. You are helping fund your fellow workers in Australia. That's what superannuation's about.
Beautifully put. And it's not like when you retire from cricket and you can, start doing
have David
sportsman's
Warner's
nights.
property portfolio.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of when you stop playing cricket, albeit you're not finishing your working career, of course, but when you stop doing that, you can, get nice envelopes of cash for speaking at lunches and that type. That's not how it works for normal people like you and me and anyone else. So, cbussuper.com.au.
Imagine you retire from, you've been a plumber for 40 years, and then you retire and they get you to come down and tell great plumbing stories, at a lunch before the Adelaide test. And you talk about the blocked drain at Davey Street and how you had to get the 3-metre snake down there and pull out a plug of hair like the length and thickness of a human arm from 30 years of share housing. It'd be a good time.
Yeah, maybe. cbussuper.com.au, their past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. We'll take a break. On the other side of it, we're going to do a very quick, we've already been doing a lap around the world. We're going to do an even quicker lap in the second half of the show, starting with the women's test that was played over the weekend.